Welcome to On Mission with WorldShare, the podcast exploring global mission through stories, conversations, and reflections from our partners and guests around the world. In this episode, Graham Albans shares what he learnt from persecuted Christians in Mexico, and we explore how God can use each of us in mission within our own communities.
Well, hello and welcome to On Mission with WorldShare, the podcast where we explore what God is doing globally through conversations with people helping to make Jesus known around the world. I'm Andrew Yelland, your host, and our guest today is Graham Albans. Welcome, Graham. It's great to have you along with us.
Privileged to be here.
Well, Graham is the Director of Mission and Outreach at Grace Community Church in Bedford. He's also the author of How One Weekend Can Give You Everything You've Ever Wanted, which is an interesting title.
It's a bit of a grand promise, isn't it, for such a small book and such a big title. But it's about Easter and how the death and resurrection of Jesus can fulfill every human longing, every human wanting. Yeah,
fantastic. Now, Graham also was a Radio 2 producer for 10 years, producing both the Chris Evans and the Zoe Ball breakfast shows. But more recently, he has just returned from a trip in Mexico where he discovered some surprising truths about Christians there. And we're going to look into those things. So, Graham, just give us a little bit of a potted history of who you are, what you're doing, so that the listeners can have a picture of who they're listening to today.
My wife and I and our 3 kids are at a church in Bedford, and which is where we've been 15 years. About 6 years ago, our career changed to start working there as Director of Mission and Outreach, looking after our community work, our evangelism there. But winding the clock back before that, as you said, I found myself working my way up through student radio into some early work experience, picking up shifts here and there at the BBC in London. Then a 6-month contract came up at Radio 2 to kind of be the entry-level kind of production assistant. And that 6 months turned into a decade. And I was producing this absolute sort of juggernaut of a breakfast show, which was at the time the kind of the biggest, most listened to radio show this side of the Atlantic, with Chris Evans. And then he left and Zoe Ball came in and we carried on. And just a fun job with fun people. Loved it.
I'm sure, yeah. Just briefly, did you ever imagine from your kind of, I should imagine that life was very frenetic when you were involved in those radio producing, those shows in particular. But did you ever imagine that your journey would take such a change in direction?
Absolutely not. I've got to be totally honest with you. Working for a church was never on the radar. Okay. It's not something I've always wanted to do. I'm still not exactly sure. Hope my bosses aren't listening. But ministry kind of stuff hasn't really ever been something I've aspired to. I always wanted to work in radio, and that's where I ended up. A little later down the line, the church said, look, we don't have a job or any money. But if we did, would you ever think about working for a church? And I said, no. Why would I want to do that? I love my job. Do you know what my job involves? It's great fun. But that planted a bit of a seed, and a year or so later, they came back and said, well, actually, at the moment, with some reshuffle, we do have a job, and here's the job description. It's this mission and outreach role and doing some evangelism and bits and pieces. And I said, well, that's me on a bit of paper. That's what I would love to be freed up to do. These are the kind of things I was doing in my spare time around work. Well, if I can be financially freed up to do this all the time, then yeah, let's go for it. That's the short version of a long pondering. Sure. But in the end, it became kind of an unignorable pull towards doing this work, and I absolutely love it. So I miss my old job, I miss the people I was working with, but I don't regret it for a second, because we love so much what we're getting to do now.
So, I mean, there's some obvious kind of crossover between both of those kind of roles in some respects, because in the producing role, you'll need to be really on it in terms of communication and connecting with people to make that show kind of work well. And then obviously connecting with people is something really, really key in terms of any kind of missional kind of engagement. So is there anything else that you've kind of like taken from your radio producer days to what you're currently doing today?
It's funny you should ask. Essentially, at core, in radio, you're trying to understand people and then communicate with them. And in church work, particularly kind of outreach and evangelism, you're trying to understand people and then communicate with them. So, there's a lot of crossover. You're working with people. You're trying to be creative in the ways you're getting things across. So, yeah.
Really good. And in that environment, were there ever kind of opportunities where faith was able to be revealed and kind of shared in that environment? Because one of the things that I'm really keen to explore with people is how their faith impacts the role that they are undertaking. And because I believe that God places us in particular places for a reason and a purpose.
Yeah, I think there were particular opportunities with particular people.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. God doesn't get the postcode wrong, by which I mean God puts you in a particular place for a reason, for a time.
Yeah.
And the postcode, as it were, that he gave me was rubbing shoulders with people who not many Christians get to rub shoulders with. But the kind of the famouses of the world, they're no different from ordinary people like us sat in this room now, with concerns, worries, backgrounds, families, deep, human needs like hope and joy and peace that need satisfying. And so I wouldn't say that there were evangelistic opportunities to share my faith at every left-hand turn with every celebrity that came through the building, but you're basically going shoulder to shoulder with people over the long term in a work environment. Well, that's anybody, isn't it?
Yep.
That you can do that when you're stacking shelves in the supermarket, when you're picking up kids at the school gate, when you're working a teaching job or coaching a football team. You're rubbing shoulders with people who don't know Jesus day by day, week by week, over the long term. And of course, behind the scenes, you've got colleagues who you're in the office with much longer over years and years and years. And so I think that whilst there was a particular opportunity, it wasn't any more special than any opportunity anybody's got in any job. And that's really the message that I would want to get across to any member of my church that we work in. So how can I encourage you to see the daily opportunities there are to share your life with people? And I say share your life with people rather than share the gospel with people, because over time, as people see you authentically living, well, ideally, your faith is authentically part of you. So you Monday morning, how was your weekend? Yeah, it was good, thanks. Went to football on Saturday, church on Sunday, switched off Sunday night with the telly. How about you?
Yeah.
Right, so your faith is authentically, going through this really tough thing. There's the redundancies.
Yeah.
Mum's got a diagnosis, whatever it is. So what is it that gives you a sense of, what pulls you through that? What's giving you that? You're sensing a peace about the situation, which I definitely would. And what is it about that? This isn't a gospel presentation at the school gates.
No.
This is authentically sharing your life with people, and Jesus is a part of your life, so share him as part of it over the long term. I
think that's really important, because each one of us has got a testimony which we don't necessarily have to speak, but just being lived out, people see that, hopefully see that transformation that Jesus makes in our lives.
You are a daily testimony.
Yeah.
So your testimony isn't necessarily, I was not a Christian, then I became a Christian, and now I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But the testimony of, today, this is how Jesus makes a difference in my life.
Yeah.
Today, this is how church was there for me.
Yeah.
Those are malleable, real-time testimonies lived out that I think are attractive and interesting.
Yeah. So you kind of talked about your change of career took place over 12 months, and you gave us a very potted history. Was there a particular defining moment within that, and you kind of thought, yeah, this is really God's leading me into this? Or was it just that continual kind of God nudging?
It was a little bit more gradual. So like I said, at first, it wasn't something that I had ever really considered. The slightly longer story is that my mid to late 20s was some significant doubts in my faith, some really unanswered questions and things that I hadn't pressed into around the truth and the kind of foundations of Christianity that I just wasn't firm on. Having pushed into those things, both the truth and the goodness of the gospel just heightened.
Yeah.
And out of that, I thought, well, if it is both good and true, more people should know about this thing, because it really can change your life. Not based on a choice for you that's nice for you, but on solid evidential foundations. So it did start to become I wonder if there is something I could do with my time and energies that helps other people know about this good and true gospel.
Yeah.
That developed into sort of helping out in bits and pieces with the church, which developed into the offer of a job. Again, it took a lot for me to hand in my notice. I'm not going to say, just this big Damascus Road bolt of lightning moment where it's like, yes, Lord, let's go. It was more gradual than that, prayerfully with Jo, my wife, with the church leaders. It got to a point where, like I said, it was just unignorable.
Yeah.
And I remember Jo asked me just off the cuff one day, I think we were washing up, and she just said, so do you think if you said no to it, you'd be being disobedient? And I instinctively like, yes. Oh, and I think that was
the realization. Yeah. So what advice would you give to any Christian who's maybe listening to this, who's currently working in a secular environment, who feels God may be preparing them for the kind of change that you've experienced yourself?
I would say don't underestimate the fact that God has you in this particular time and place for a reason.
Yeah.
God doesn't get the postcode wrong of where he's got you. Potentially, if you're evangelistically hearted, potentially there may not be a better opportunity to be rubbing shoulders daily with non-Christians.
Yeah.
That said, if you're feeling that unignorable pull to go into a ministry context where you might be able to put some fire behind that, some more time and energy, and also then bring other people along with you to do that for themselves and multiply that, then that's worth listening to.
Yeah.
I think God opens doors for those things to happen, but take your time over it, consider it. If you start sensing over time, I think that's the thing for me, is over time becomes a pull where you say, I think if I was freed up from my paid work to do this kind of work, I think it could be fruitful. That would be my slow and prayerful advice.
Very good. Thanks so much for that, Graham. I'm sure that's going to be really helpful for some people listening today. But let's kind of bring it forward a little bit. I know that you're a keen footballer.
Keen in mind, not in legs.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
Okay. But I understand that you recently had an invitation to go and maybe play some football in Mexico. And obviously that's been one of the host kind of countries, Mexico City, one of the host cities of the recent World Cup, which just finished. So tell us how that came about, and what was your first experience in it of Mexico?
My phone pinged, and it was my friend Emma, who works for an organisation called Open Doors, you may be familiar with.
Yep.
And she said, how would you feel about a potential trip to Mexico to play some football in May? I was like, I'd feel great about that. That sounds fantastic. Oh, by the way, it's to visit some persecuted missionaries in really hard to reach places. Oh, okay. Yes, I'm still interested. What an amazing opportunity to go for a week to some areas of Mexico in a region called the Circle of Silence. And it's called that because there are less than 1% of Bible-believing evangelical Christians there. It's very, very difficult to be a Christian outside of institutional Catholicism.
Yeah.
So if you speak about Jesus in any way that's not part of the Catholic sort of tick box religiosity, the traditional, almost tribalistic traditions of your family and ancestry, then you are at serious risk of harm. Now, I didn't know that about Mexico until this came up. But as we visited people who are living pretty difficult lives as missionaries and church pastors out there, I mean, they are leading churches in rooms not much bigger than this, where they've got sort of 7 or 8 seats out, and then he stands at the front and reads the Bible quietly, and then everyone goes home. This one pastor, he would have his church meeting in the front room, then they'd go out for a barbecue just to eat together and share fellowship together. They've had to put up fences outside their garden because they get stones thrown at them by passing gangs. He lived in the neighborhood where there was a big cartel boss taken out by the government, who was in the news kind of earlier in the year. It's not safe to be a Jesus-following, Jesus-proclaiming Christian in certain areas of Mexico. And yet these guys were doing things like football outreach projects in communities where young people and young adults were turning to gangs and crime just to get through, because that's just what you did.
Yeah.
And so once a week or once a night, they would have an hour of play, an hour of joy, an hour of connecting with their communities. Again, rubbing shoulders day by day, week by week, over the long term with people. Yeah. And they would share the gospel with them over time as they shared lives together over time. They were running football coaching teams. They were in schools teaching English to teenagers. They were intentionally using hospitality on their streets, being good neighbours. They were having people in their homes to run basically secret Bible studies. Very, very moving, very moving. A lot of fun. You know, we got to go and visit one of the stadiums in Guadalajara where the Mexico teams play, and where one of the World Cup, some of the World Cup games were, and obviously playing football in schools with teenagers and in neighbourhood communities. I mean, literally, it was a lot of fun. But literally, we were brushing broken glass and bricks off kind of concrete pitches before we were setting cones and goals out for these kids would come and play in the community. So it was a wonderful experience, full of mad highs and heartbreaking lows. You know, you'd find out about these children's lives and the abuse that goes on and some heartbreaking situations. And so to know that there are missionaries that we can support and pray for in these environments is brilliant, because they are in it for the long term with these kids and these families who otherwise potentially would never hear the name of Jesus. And he's the only one that's going to free these kids from the heartbreaking life situations that they're in.
Here at WorldShare, we're really keen to work in partnership with as many people as possible. So you mentioned Open Doors. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, for those who may be listening who doesn't or hasn't heard of Open Doors, what they do?
Open Doors support, I think it's something like 70 countries around the world, missionaries and pastors in 70 countries around the world where there's persecution. Yeah. And they have something called the World Watch List, which is worth searching for on the internet, where they essentially every year they rank what's the most dangerous countries to live in out of those 70s. Mexico comes up about 30, which clearly there's a lot more dangerous places you can live, but I thought 30 was quite high for a place I didn't know much about.
Yeah. It's kind of surprising what you're saying, to be honest with you, because we kind of associate, or we can associate with persecution of Bible-believing or Jesus followers in places like North Korea and the Middle East. But Mexico is certainly not necessarily one of those countries that you would rank in, as being that problematic for Christians.
Every convert that we met has been cut off from their family.
Really?
And for some of them, their communities in terms of even their electricity and water. One pastor that we met with, he is charged higher rent for his family home because he's a Christian. They're trying to buy a larger property to grow their house church, but they can't get a mortgage or whatever they call it there because they're Christians. The converts that they've reached, their own brothers and sisters and mums and dads don't talk to them anymore. They've had their car tires slashed and homes broken into because they're Christians. Now we think of Catholicism being a sort of an inherited background or whatever. Over there, if you leave Catholicism, you're essentially leaving your family tradition, your country sort of heritage. To be a good Mexican, you have to be a good Catholic.
Yeah.
And so to become an evangelical, actually, I'm doing this because of a personal relationship with Jesus rather than a superstitious relationship with the church, it opens you up to just some real hardships. And so converts there, the parable of the sower comes into stark contrast. Some of the seeds shows promising first signs, but then there's a lot that chokes it out. Some converts don't last very long. They're put in makeshift jail cells that people grab them. I'm not talking like officially, legally, the police come and get them, but they'll just be grabbed by the kind of elders of the village and put in locked rooms. I mean, there have been violent attacks. There's a lot that would choke out someone's faith.
Yeah.
And yet there are some people who are so captured by Jesus, so in love with him, so recognize their desperate need of the gospel, that's all they're hanging on to, despite the vandalism, the home break-ins, the excommunication from communities and families. And
those things you kind of necessarily associate with other regions of the world, wouldn't you?
Right.
Certainly not sort of in the Americas, to be honest with you. So that is really surprising. I mean, you've mentioned a couple of kind of key areas. I mean, organised crime. You talk about gangs, local politics, and you've also hinted on the traditions. I mean, those three things, how key are they in terms of how persecution is lived out?
Some of it is subtle, some of it's really overt, some of it overlaps with one another. Some Christians who have a public platform to speak out against some of the drug gang culture have been assassinated. So that's quite extreme. Others will be using football and schools outreach to, over the long term, build relationships with families, which is slightly less overt, but the persecution is no less real in that when families realise that they are Christians, not Catholics, for want of a better phrase, the income reduces. One school teacher who's building bridges with families through being an English teacher in school, his wage has been dropped. He's had his opportunities in classrooms cut from 8 classes to 5. So these are subtle things. Persecution doesn't just being shot at and put in a jail cell. Persecution can take all kinds of forms. So the organised gang crime, that's very kind of present, but there's also the kind of subtle emotional damage that can come from the traditions passed down and the expectations of someone to continue within a tradition, and then the sort of subtle punishment over the long term for not. Those things can kind of all overlap.
Much of that sounds very similar to a number of years ago. I visited Cuba, and at the time then, if you made a confession of faith in Jesus in what was a communist atheistic country, this exactly the same things happened, which for us is almost completely alien, isn't it? I don't think we realise here in the UK how blessed we are to be able to stand up and say that we believe in Jesus. And I think the big shame is that we don't often take full advantage of that opportunity.
I totally agree. And the Mexicans would agree.
Yeah.
Very much so. One guy I spoke to, he's a missionary in the town where he was previously a gang leader. He was converted because a knife fight went wrong for him. He ended up in hospital. Yeah. The only thing to read was a Bible in the bedside drawer. He came in face to face with Jesus in the Gospels. He came out of hospital convinced that he needed to spread the gospel, also convinced that the most potent place to do that would be the town that he was a gang leader in, because that's where people would see the most change in him. Already you think, well, I sometimes have a bit of awkwardness at the school gates because I'm a Christian. Yeah, I can probably start to get over that. I asked this guy, what would be your message to the UK church? And without even missing a beat, he said, oh, you have all of the opportunity and none of the openness. Yeah. He said, in your context, in your country, you have all the liberty to share the gospel and none of the openness and bravery to do so. Now, I think that's a generalization, but look at it from their point of view. This guy is at constant risk of losing his life, of being, risk to his family, home, and yet he sticks in there because, and again, this is a big theme that came up with a handful of the different pastors and missionaries we met with, and he articulated it well. He said, if we don't stick in here when it's hard, who else will? Yeah. If we don't tell them about Jesus, who else is going to? And coming back to my comparatively very comfy lifestyle in the UK, you think, if they can stick at it, I can definitely stick at it. If I can endure a few kind of the football boys on a Thursday night call me have a nickname for me associated with my faith, right? And I won't repeat it here, but I reckon I can endure that compared to what other people around the world are having to endure. I reckon if I'm not sticking in there with my Thursday night football guys to share Jesus, at the minute, who else is going to? Yeah. I don't think that crushing responsibility needs to be all on me. God is sovereign, and Jesus is the primary evangelist. He uses me for a time and season. But if I just go, you know what? It's a bit awkward, isn't it, to stay in here? I don't know, man. I just don't think I could face my Mexican brothers and sisters and say, yeah, I ditched out because of a nickname.
Would that be the one message that you would want believers in the UK to kind of take from what you experienced in Mexico? Or is there anything else that you think is really key for us not to kind of miss?
My big takeaway from being in Mexico to coming back to the UK was this. We visited people who were paid missionaries out there, supported by churches and organizations and missional organizations around the world, to be paid missionaries, kind of capital M missionaries. And the way that they were being missionaries was doing the football coaching and reaching families and young people like that, going into schools and being teachers, intentionally using hospitality in their homes to reach their streets. And they're paid to do that. And that's the way in which they are being missionaries is those means. And on returning to the UK, I thought what they're doing is kind of what we can all do. We can all be good neighbours. We can all be intentional with how we use our homes for hospitality and mixing people. If you're involved with a sports team or a coach team, you have impact on young people and families. If you're a teacher, you are meeting kids, have an impact on their lives and knowing their families over time. If you're a parent, you're dropping your kids at the same school gate, meeting if you're in an office environment, you can be a small M missionary.
Yeah.
Your job might not be job title big M missionary, paid for by an organisation and a church, but we're all in missional environments if we open our eyes to it. Yeah. They weren't street preachers.
Yeah.
They weren't even all church leaders.
Yeah.
But they were all missionaries, and we can all be like that when we open our eyes to the little environments that God has placed us in, and be intentional with how we are authentically living our lives and therefore our faiths.
Just before we move on, I want to ask you one more question about. So we talked about the fact that in the UK we don't take advantage of the opportunities that we have, the freedom that we have. There often needs to be a time whereby we move from that kind of that living out faith to a point whereby there may be an opportunity to actually speak about it. What advice would you give someone who's wanting to become more confident in actually, when that opportunity comes, to talk about Jesus to that individual at the football club or in the pub or whatever it is?
I'd say take the pressure off yourself, right? So sharing your faith, sharing the gospel does not have to be a full gospel presentation, bridge diagram, 5 points of the whole Bible story. Let me tell you about when I was like a drug dealer in prison by the time I was 5 years old. Then I met Jesus and now life's wonderful. It's not that. At our church, we talk about 3 questions, which Glenn Scrivener from Speak Life has really helped us do some thinking around in what he's written on the topic. Three sentences, that you be able to finish for yourself. One sentence is this: having Jesus in my life makes a difference because ... Now that sentence in itself, having Jesus in my life makes a difference because when mum gets the diagnosis, somehow our faith pulls us through that. Okay, great, done. When the redundancy strikes, having Jesus in my life makes a difference because actually I know that my security isn't in what I earn or my job title. It's in what he says about me.
Yeah.
Fine. The second question is this. The thing I love about church is, Monday morning, how was your weekend? Great. Football Friday or whatever, church Sunday. By the way, the thing I love about my church is we had a huge donation for the food bank recently. Have you ever thought about doing that? The thing I love about my church is we do this brilliant once a month open community buffet. It's totally free. It's really fun. You get all sorts there. The thing I love about my church is the oldest person is about 101. The youngest person is 1. There's people from 40 different nations speaking 30 different languages. It's great. Yeah. Anyway, how was your weekend? And the third sentence is the time my faith really got me through was ... And again, you go shoulder to shoulder with people over the long term. At some point, life hits the fan for people.
Yeah.
So what gets you through? What's actually pulling you through this time? Tell me. For me, my faith got me through a time when ... And so I think that when the opportunity comes up just to say something authentic about how Jesus makes a difference to your life, thing that you love about the church, a time when faith has pulled you through rough stuff. Those are the things that I think people are interested in, because you've got something that they don't have.
Yeah.
And over time, they'll spot that in you. And they'll what is it that makes a difference? And they may not articulate it like that, but it's just those droplets of seeds into conversation that you can drop in.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Graham. That's really, really insightful. Our time is drawing to a close, but I do want to just turn slightly back full circle to think about broadcasting, but in a missional context, if we can, just for a few moments. Obviously, you're out of the radio kind of game, as it were. Do you think the impact of radio is increasing or decreasing at this time?
I think people are listening to stuff a lot. The rise of podcasts and Spotify and things like that are obviously through the roof.
Yep.
Whether kind of live linear radio will continue to be as big as it was 10, 20 years ago, who knows? But the audio world, people are consuming content all the time. I think people have arguably got more time for podcasts than they have for pages.
Yeah.
And so I think we have a great opportunity with broadcasting, with digital technologies, to be a gospel mouthpiece for sure. Not everyone is a podcaster, not everyone is a broadcaster, but most people are on social media, right? The easiest way you can be an evangelist is with the share button.
Yeah.
It's the easiest form of missional outreach evangelism you can do. Click share button. So find yourself some people to follow on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever you're on. Find some good quality evangelistic Christian people organizations. Follow their content. When you see something that you think, that's fantastic, that's a great story, great illustration, great testimony, whatever it is, share. It's low level and it's really easy. For some, that might even break the barrier, by the way, between your friends knowing you're a Christian and not knowing. Mm-hmm. And now they know a Christian that they didn't realize they knew before. If you've got something to communicate, or someone to communicate, which we absolutely do, find the ways in which people need to hear that message. Mm-hmm. What is it about Jesus' life, death, and resurrection and reign that satisfies the human need for security and peace and joy? The things that every human heart is looking for.
Yeah.
Love, freedom. What's missing in people's lives? And then how can I connect the dots between what people are missing and what Jesus can give people? And then what is the platform in which I can communicate those things? I would encourage anybody with a bit of tech and a bit of time and capacity to say, if you can make it, make it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, we just got a few quick fire questions to kind of round up, if that's okay, Greg. What's your most favorite place that you've ever visited in the world?
Oh, Mexico. I might be Mexico, but I also love Cornwall. We go camping in Cornwall every year, and it's beautiful when the sun shines.
Okay. If there was one person in the world that you haven't met or you had the opportunity to interview, who would that be?
Some people might be familiar with a current internet influencer celebrity named Bonnie Blue. And if you're familiar with the name, you'll know how sad her situation really is. If you're not familiar with her name, be careful with your Google search. But I would love an honest conversation with Bonnie to root out what's your background? What's happened there? If you're a praying person, pray for Bonnie, because she is living out in real time quite a car crash of a search for love and meaning and joy and hope. And I would love to have an interview with her, long form, to find out what is her background and what actually is missing.
One final question. You talked about the three sentences in terms of evangelism.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to finish this sentence. Following Jesus on mission means...
living your authentic life with Jesus as part of it, every day in whatever environment you're in. It could be at home with the kids, it could be in the workplace, or stacking shelves. That's what it means.
Brilliant. Well, our time really has come to an end, Graham, but it's been really great to speak with you. And thank you for listening to this episode of On Mission with WorldShare. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and maybe even share it with somebody who you think might benefit. If you'd like to know more about the work of WorldShare, please check out our website, worldshare.org.uk. And otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of On Mission with WorldShare. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to On Mission with WorldShare. To discover more stories, pray with us, or support our partners, visit worldshare.org.uk. And if you found this conversation helpful, please follow the podcast and share it with someone who might be encouraged by it.